Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the organizers of the conference for inviting me to speak. It's an incredible honor to speak at the conference, the namesake conference for our mentor. So I'm really glad to be here. We've heard so much about AI over the last year. I mean, it's almost like you can't go a day without seeing something in the news about AI, something in your financial portfolio about AI, something in medicine about AI. And so I'm excited to be able to talk to you about some developments in AI, but really I want us to all kind of have a framework of understanding, kind of a basic understanding of some concepts in AI before we get into specific breakthroughs and developments and that sort of thing, just so that we kind of understand the whole landscape of this new and upcoming field. AI is rapidly changing how we diagnose, monitor, and treat cardiac disease. And I think that as we move toward the future of medicine, it's going to be really important for us to all understand what we're dealing with. I do have some disclosures to make. I am a Chief Medical Officer and Compliance Officer and an equity stakeholder in Octagos. And I do receive consulting research money and honoraria from Medtronic. The world of AI involves vocabulary and concepts that few of us in medicine understand very well. So I'm going to try to give you these tools, give you the language, the vocabulary, and so on, so that we can all kind of be on the same page. And I'd like to watch a little video to illustrate that concept.
Das hier ist mein Sektor. Das hier ist das wichtigste Gerät des Küstenwächters. Das Gerät und das Gerät. Überlebensradar.
Mayday, Mayday. Hello, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Can you... Over. We are sinking. We are sinking.
Hello? This is the German Coast Guard.
We are sinking. We're sinking.
What are you thinking about?
Does that do you feel like that when people start talking about AI? I do. I know I did, for sure. Okay, so let's start with a little game, okay? So everybody, just feel free to call it out. We're going to look at some company logos and see, this is just going to, I think, prove the point as to how ubiquitous this has become in everyday life. So, anyone? Tesla, right? Tesla actually uses pure vision-based AI in their full self-driving model. They don't use maps like a lot of the other car companies, and so it's a really kind of unique way of doing it. And I think that's part of the reason why Tesla is so far ahead of everybody else on the full self-driving. Okay, next one. OpenAI, ChatGPT, right? How many of you have ever used ChatGPT for anything? Everyone, almost, right? Okay, next. Meta. I don't know if you guys saw this in the news, but Mark Zuckerberg announced that he's going to start replacing mid-level engineers as early as this year in his company with AI-based workflows. So I guess it's already started. Their AI is replacing jobs. Next. NVIDIA. They make the chips that power most of what we do with AI, in particular OpenAI and that sort of thing. Anyone? It's the new logo for Apple Intelligence. So this is the new Siri logo. I'm sure you've all used that. Microsoft, they've introduced AI into their Microsoft Office. So at this point, if somebody tells you to write a paper about something or make a presentation, you can just tell PowerPoint that you need a presentation on X, Y, or Z, and you may end up with an outline that is pretty workable. Netflix. Everybody watches Netflix. Did you know that the thumbnails that you see on your Netflix screen are actually programmed for your AI-based for you? That is, if you like romantic movies and that sort of thing, they'll show you a picture, a DVD cover for maybe the couple holding each other, or if you like action movies, they'll show you a picture of like maybe that same couple is in a shootout. So they get you one way or another. And that's how they make personalized recommendations for you. Okay, finally, this one, anyone? DeepSeek. This is the new Chinese AI, supposedly built for a fraction of the cost of OpenAI and with performance that's similar.
Otherwise known as ChatGPT.
Right, I wasn't going to say it, but who could imagine that the Chinese would take intellectual property from someone else and make it for cheaper? Okay. So we'll go through the basics of AI, talk about challenges as they relate to AI in medicine, AI in electrophysiology, and we're going to look at some really cool things that have been developed for us as electrophysiologists and cardiologists. And then we'll get into future applications. So let's start with kind of just a broad overview. And before diving into AI's role in cardiology, I'd like to just kind of establish the concept. So AI refers to computer systems that mimic human intelligence. They allow machines to learn from data, recognize patterns, and make decisions. So AI can discover, reason, and infer. And the concept actually, I think it was sort of first envisioned or talked about in the 1930s, but then really kind of people came together and talked about how they could accomplish this in the 1950s. And that was actually done at a conference at Dartmouth College where I did my undergraduate, not in the 50s, but, and then it's just, it's remarkable what's happened since that time. So machine learning is actually a subset of this larger concept called AI. And it involves predictions or decisions based on data. And the machine learning enables systems to sort of improve over time without explicit programming. That is, you're not just programming if X then Y into your computer, but your computer rather is taking in data and then training itself, so to speak. Deep learning is a more advanced form, and again, a subfield of machine learning that uses a technology called neural networks. And basically, I think how you can kind of envision that or conceptualize that is there's sort of like multiple decision points. And so, for example, I saw online somebody described it as, should we order pizza? And the decision points are as follows. Number one, am I hungry? Number two, is pizza going to break the bank? Number three, how much do I like pizza? And so if you assign a score to each one of those decision points, and it might just be a yes or no, a 0 or 1, or it might be a multiplier, like I really like pizza, that's going to be 10 points on the pizza scale. But at the end of all of those decisions, you come out with sort of you allow the computer to make a decision based on multiple decision points. So that's deep learning at a very basic level. Now, one thing about the deep learning is that, or those neural networks, is a lot of times we don't understand how the computer made the decision that it made. Okay, so that calculation happens in the background, but the computer doesn't spit out, this is how I decided that you should order pizza, or you should not order pizza. So machine learning kind of falls into three main categories. First, there's supervised learning. It's learning based on labeled data. So typically, like a human would say, this picture is of a dog, and this picture is of a dog, and this picture is of a dog. And then the computer kind of gets an idea of what is a dog, and then you can allow the computer to decide if the next picture matches what you told it was dog or not. Okay, so supervised learning you can teach an AI to detect arrhythmias by analyzing ECGs, and it's sort of a classification scheme. On the other hand, unsupervised learning helps identify patterns. Okay, so they could cluster patients based on their cardiac risk factors. You can cluster groups. You can make associations. They don't make predictions, but you kind of get the idea. You can take a large data set and find some associations and patterns that you may not see just seeing the one patient or 30 patients in front of you that day, right? There's also semi-supervised learning. For example, radiologists review images and you feed the system 1,000 images, and then you feed it 10,000 more, and you allow it to make those associations and based on the training it got from the original data set. Reinforcement learning is another adaptive decision-making system. You can optimize, for example, in medicine, optimize medication doses over time by seeing what the response was to input X, and so the machine can sort of teach itself that way. And those AI techniques are helping us unlock new possibilities in all of medicine, as far from research to patient care. So let's just, so now it's kind of easier to understand why the benefits of AI in medicine are just so numerous, right? I mean, it can reduce human error by detecting subtle patterns that could be missed by the human. AI-powered tools can process massive data sets to improve clinical decision-making and make correlations that otherwise wouldn't have been considered. Automation of repetitive tasks like ECG and physiologic data processing, that can be handled by AI. And finally, we can streamline our workflows, reducing administrative burden and optimizing resource allocation and costs in hospitals and clinics. So despite its advantages, though, AI comes with challenges, right? There can be bias in the algorithms. If you just kind of remember that these training sets are developed, based on what we feed into the machine. So it's only going to be as good as the data that's provided into the system. And there's this sort of black box nature of the deep learning that I kind of talked to you about, is that a computer that makes a decision doesn't necessarily tell you why it made that decision. And you, as a human, may or may not agree with how that decision was made. And so it just kind of highlights the idea that while AI enhances our decision-making in a lot of ways, at this point, at least in medicine, by and large, clinicians need to remain sort of in control to ensure ethical and accurate patient care. So I guess another way of saying that, I've heard the term used, human-in-the-loop AI. And so really at this point, we really benefit from the advantages of the AI engines that are helping us, but we really remain the final arbiters of these observations and recommendations and conclusions that the computers are making. Okay, so next I'd like to introduce a different concept in AI. And I'm going to kind of, I'm going to paint a picture, and I just want you to kind of imagine the future with this concept. And this concept is called super agency. So we call these AI tools that we use agents. So for example, ChatGPT is an agent that you can use to enhance your everyday tasks, right? Like I'm going on vacation, and I use this, by the way. I took my son to Washington, D.C., and I didn't know where to begin. We had 3 days in Washington, D.C., and I kind of wanted to pack as much in as possible. So I used the agent to say, I'm going to Washington, D.C., I have 3 days, what should we do? And it gave me an itinerary. And I said, well, but we really want to do this. Can you add that into the thing? And it did. And then I really want you to consider when museums are open and closed. And I also want you to consider the fact that we're mostly going to be using the subway and Uber to get around. So could you make this more efficient? So it refined it over and over again. Now that was just me using one agent, and I got a really great result. But this concept, super agency, has been introduced by Reid Hoffman. He was one of the founders of LinkedIn. He's now a partner at Greylock, which is a private equity firm. But super agency refers to AI systems that go beyond just assistance. Okay, they become an extension of human capability by autonomously managing workflows, making independent decisions, and executing tasks that traditionally required human oversight. So the way I kind of wanted to describe this is through an analogy. And so if you can imagine that the car, imagine the car as an agent, but then think about the super agency of the invention of the car, okay? Before automobiles, people kind of walked and used horses and trains, and they were dependent on schedules, and it took forever to get from point A to point B, all right? But as cars became ubiquitous, when everybody started using them, super agency took over, right? It wasn't so much that patient A could drive to the doctor and get patient care, but more importantly, patient A could drive to the doctor, and then the doctor could put in a prescription, and that prescription could be delivered to the patient's house. Home care could come to the patient. Now everybody has a car. It changes everything. I mean, it becomes a very different proposition to say one person using one tool to accomplish one task to a whole world that changes, right? There had to be roads built, gas stations. They had to have urban planning that was built around having cars. There was economic expansion, created jobs, new business models, construction. There was a whole cultural shift that happened with the super agency of the vehicle. So in medicine, it's much the same. I mean, I think what we're going to see is the super agency of AI take over in medicine. I think it's going to enhance research. I think we're going to be able to use these tools and make breakthroughs much quicker than we had in the past. There are going to be personalized treatment plans for patients based on their specific data. I think that this is something that is going to change the way we practice, especially over the next 10 to 20 years. I think it's going to be remarkable. So there's some things to consider, though, as they relate to AI, privacy concerns, consent for AI. Right now the way we sort of obtain consent in medicine is we ask for consent, and we ask for consent for a certain thing, and we use that, that tool or that procedure or whatever to accomplish some end. But now we're going to sort of have to get broad consent. Are we allowed to use your data? Where does that data come from? Does it come from our interaction? Does it come from all of your sensors in your environment, or that all that's going to feed into your care? And I think we're going to have to seek broader consent from patients for the utilization of their data. The other thing is privacy, right? I mean, privacy is a real concern. And it's not just so much data privacy violations that result in specific harms to the patient, like somebody gets your social security number and opens a bank account. There's other things to consider, and it's sort of a philosophical question, right? But if there's a broad data breach and your private medical information goes to somebody in another country who doesn't know who you are, and will never meet you and will never specifically harm you, is it still a harm to you? Just that exposure. And so, there are a lot of things to consider as they relate to this huge data set that comes from patients. I mean, another way to think of this is, we're going to talk about it later, the EKG contains an enormous amount of data. And how is that going to be used? It's sort of along the lines of genetic data, where I'm going to show you in future slides that your ECG today can predict your future. And so do you really, when your life insurance company comes to you and says, oh, we just want to obtain a 12-lead ECG, it may or may not be in your best interest to, I think they're going to make you do it, right? But depending on how they use it, they're going to make some conclusions about your future. Okay, just a little break here. I thought this was interesting. This is some place in India, and it's got a big sign that, the first time I read it, it reads "Child Bear" to me. So I kind of wondered, is this like a mini zoo that's inside there that you pay like a couple bucks and you could see a bear cub? Or is it for like maybe pregnant women go in there for, maybe it's a doctor's office? So I wondered what ChatGPT would do with this picture. I said, ChatGPT, what's going on here? And here's specifically the answer I got. It said, the Hindi text above the shop, and then it like puts something in script that I don't understand and can't read, translates to government chilled beer shop, confirming that the store is actually selling beer, not anything related to children or bears. It's like, wow, okay, I did not expect, I kind of thought that ChatGPT was going to totally screw this up and say it was a little zoo or something. But in fact, it really was an agent, and it could read another language and told me what was going on. And then further, it says, this type of error is a common example of mistranslations found on signs in non-English speaking regions, often due to phonetic mistakes or incorrect transliteration. The image is likely used online as an example of amusing translation errors. It goes so far as to say, this might be funny to you, but it's actually, just an error in transliteration. So let's kind of move into AI in cardiology, okay? AI is being used for more accurate diagnostics, risk stratification, and treatment planning. Predictive models can identify patients at high risk for cardiovascular events, and AI ECG analysis, as I'm going to show you, can detect abnormalities faster than traditional methods. AI also plays a role in electrophysiology. There are companies out there that are using electrogram data to help you predict your ablation procedures, predict anatomy, predict how procedures should be done, and so forth. So these are pictures of my office, sadly. This is back when I was in Idaho, and we did a lot on paper. And I just want you to, it's meant to be an example of the enormous amount of data that that comes across our desks every day. And I would assert that it is impossible for me to coalesce all of that data every single time I see a patient and utilize that for their care that day. And I think that in the information era, when we've gone to computerized records and as we use AI to distill this information, our care of patients is changing. And I think that the picture illustrates that. I mean, I think we all have experienced that as we've gone to record systems that are much more capable of providing quick access to information. So in EP, we're totally inundated with data. And so, but I want to kind of get an understanding of what AI can do for us and how to look at the data that relates to the performance of AI systems. Okay, so this is a little dry, but just bear with me for a moment. So this is a receiver operating characteristic curve. And a lot of you have seen these before, but I want to explain what they are because these things show up on a lot of AI algorithms and in papers as they relate to AI. So basically, this is a graph that shows how well a classifier does at different threshold values. So it plots the true positive rate against the false positive rate. And so this picture, this graph in particular, is actually a perfect model, right? It has an area under the curve of 1, and this when this model says something is true positive, it is true positive. Okay, so that's what the curve looks like. And the name comes from, they use this concept actually in World War II to detect radio signals in the presence of noise. So they were trying to say, okay, is that thing real or is that just noise? And so they came up with these curves, okay? The receiver operating characteristic and the area under the curve of completely random guesses looks like this, okay? And the area under the curve is 0.5. So it's maybe true, maybe not true, okay? You just take it for what it is. And this is what the curves look like in most AI models, at least the ones that people publish, right? So the model that you see on your left is an area under the curve of 0.65, and the one on the right is 0.85, or 0.93. And the model on the right, therefore, is one that you can, that's a better model. It's a stronger model. Okay, and just by way of example, the AUC of like a stress test that you do is around 0.7 or 0.8. A mammogram is 0.85, and the CHAD score is 0.68. So the models that we're going to look at actually have stronger results. I'm going to skip this in the interest of time. So anybody know who this is? Einthoven. Right? Dutch physician and physiologist, received the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 1924 for the invention of the first practical electrocardiograph. He called it the string galvanometer. It was built on earlier observations that the beating heart produced electrical currents, and we all know that at this point, right? But recording of those electrical currents required electrodes placed on the heart, and Einthoven for the first time was able to show that data with electrodes or with readings made externally from the subject. Anyone else know what else Einthoven was possibly famous for? He was linked and is still on the list of possible suspects to have been Jack the Ripper. So, well, fun fact. According to Netflix, I don't know if that was true or not. However, it was believed that his motive was strictly research-based. I think so. So, and today, over 300 million ECGs are done in the US alone. So, a group at Stanford actually developed a deep neural network to classify 12 rhythm classes using 91,000 single-lead ECGs from over 50,000 patients. Okay? And they were able to quite successfully classify these arrhythmias. And so here are the ROC curves and the area under the curves for different rhythm problems. And the other things that you see on the chart here are individual cardiologists and average cardiologists. They made some calculations wherein they used the positive and negative predictive value of the findings of the AI engine and then compared it to the cardiologist. And in fact, with the specificity fixed at the average specificity achieved by cardiologists, the sensitivity of the deep neural network was actually greater in all rhythm classes that were analyzed. So pretty powerful tool if we just allow the AI engine to pre-read. And that has then subsequently been used to develop applications. Like there's a company called Powerful Medical, and I actually signed up for it. It's not FDA cleared in the United States as a medical device yet, but they're seeking FDA approval. This is available in Europe already. And you can use an iPhone to snap a photo of an electrocardiogram, and it can tell you STEMI or not STEMI and can make rhythm reads for you. So that's called Powerful Medical. You can go to their website, and you guys can sign up for it. I think they give you like 5 ECGs to try it out on for free, and after that, you start paying for it. Next is the EAGLE trial from the Mayo Clinic. I think this is amazing, okay? They basically, you know, Mayo has such a huge repository of data, all data as it relates to patients, right? I mean, the patient's whole medical record is at Mayo. So their ECGs over time, their echoes over time are all housed at Mayo. And so they basically paired the ECG data with historical echo data for over 40,000 patients, okay? And they trained a neural network to identify patients with LV systolic dysfunction. So LV systolic function, ECG, this is what the ECG might look like. And they said, okay. So they train the engine that way. And that was tested independently, then moving forward on 52,000 patients. And the model performed with an AUC of 0.93. That's really good. Okay, so checks your ECG, and the model predicts, do you have LV systolic dysfunction or not? Okay? But even more impressive, and this is the part that is really cool, was that in patients without LV systolic dysfunction at baseline, those that had a positive screen on their EAGLE AI engine-based ECG analysis were 4 times as likely to develop future LV systolic dysfunction. So this model not only tells you what's going on now, but can predict the future. Another ECG study was a model for AI-detected LV systolic dysfunction, 12-lead ECG. This was used to predict new onset heart failure. Used in different parts of the world in multinational cohorts, the ECG model strongly predicted the risk of future heart failure. And so now we not only have an LV systolic function test, but we have a clinical test for heart failure. Another example that uses ECG to screen for atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease used a large data set from Stanford using 12-lead ECGs. They developed this model called SEER. It was the Stanford Estimator of Electrocardiogram Risk. And SEER predicts 5-year cardiovascular mortality with an area under the curve of 0.83, which is pretty good, you know, about as good as a stress test. And it only uses, only using lead 1, instead of using a 12-lead ECG, the area under the curve is 0.80. So that gives you an idea that, I mean, this doesn't even require a 12-lead ECG. I mean, just a single rhythm tracing from a patient. It's also been used in other studies to screen for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, amyloidosis, age assessment. Actually, at Mayo, they have data that can predict your age based on your ECG. And I saw a really cool slide that was presented by the Mayo guys of a patient who had age-predicted ECG, and the age kept going up and up and up. And then the next ECG, the age drops by like 20 years. Anybody know what happened with that patient? Yeah, he got a transplant. It's amazing. Right? So this guy that had an ECG age of X dropped 20 years as soon as he got a new heart. Pretty neat. You can predict pulmonary hypertension, silent AF. And this is a photo from Dr. Jag Singh. I mean, you know, this is the future of our specialty, right? I mean, we're going to be using AI models. We're going to be using virtual reality. I think that all of these things are coming, and they're not necessarily here yet, and one could argue whether they're useful or not. I mean, do you need a model, 3D model right in front of your face? Maybe, maybe not. But I think it just kind of illustrates where we're going with all this. So the future of medicine is happening now. It's already happening. By the way, I should tell you, at Mayo, when you look up a patient's ECG on Epic, they actually have an AI ECG panel. And it'll give you a box. It'll give you the patient's ECG age. It'll give you their estimated ejection fraction based on the AI engine. It'll give you their future risk of developing heart failure, LV systolic dysfunction, amyloidosis. I mean, it'll just give you a percentage. What's the chance? And interestingly enough, there was a patient that came in, a young man whose sister died suddenly. They plugged his ECG into the AI engine, and it predicted very high likelihood of LV systolic dysfunction. They got an echo, and his ejection fraction was 18%. So just imagine if his sister would have just had a 12-lead ECG processed through that AI engine, she may have been saved. So So like I said, the future of medicine is happening now. We're talking about virtual, sensor-aided, AI-driven healthcare, okay? The Jetsons guessed this in the 1960s, that we would be doing telemedicine, having pills going through our intestines, and getting virtual care. So wearable technology is already here. Apple Watches are ubiquitous. They're already being used to detect atrial fibrillation, but there's more. There's studies underway to use the ECG function of the Apple Watch to screen for LV systolic dysfunction. They're already doing that at Mayo. And that model has shown an area under the curve of 0.88. So Apple Watch, ECG, transmitted to Mayo, highly correlative with LV systolic dysfunction. It's being used for predictive analytics. Your home is going to gather data about you, about your physiology, about your environment, your noise levels, your air quality, what you're eating. Your refrigerator knows what you've eaten. It knows what, maybe your food contains an allergen and your refrigerator will say, don't eat this. All of these things. So this is the home of the future, and it's coming. We're going to have a ton of data, and we're going to have to be able to assimilate that data and use it for the care of our patients. Let's see. I'll just move forward. I have one last video to show you. I just think it's kind of cute. It's interesting. It's from the news, and I'll let you leave it at this.
Modern, sleek, high-tech. It's a toilet seat, and it might just be the next generation in home care.
Most of the data that is collected may be more applicable to someone's health is what happens to them at home. Only 10% of the data that relates to a person's health is captured in the electronic medical record, and 90% of what matters to someone's health is not observed because the patient is home.
The Heart Seat is a new technology now being tested in a clinical trial at the UMass Chan Medical School in Worcester called Collating Outcomes with Mobile Monitoring, or COMMODE. The device is capable of a host of passive data collection. In the same way a smartwatch monitors data on your wrist, the smart toilet monitors data through your backside.
So we just sit our buns right on these little sensors and it does all the work?
It does all of the work. It lets us know more than just heart health. It lets us know how someone's flight or fight response or what their stress versus rest ruminant response is.
Lead researcher Dr. Apurv Sawhney says the battery lasts a full year, no pesky charging issues, temperature, heart rate, oxygen levels, a complete data dump, all recorded by these embedded sensors.
And these sensors are called ballisticardiogram, and it measures tiny pressure differences as blood traverses through your buttocks and thigh region. And based off of that, with use of advanced analytics and artificial intelligence models, we can actually calculate blood pressure.
Perhaps a futuristic application, but this smart toilet may someday not only help patients monitor their health at home, help their doctors obtain more accurate readings, but also maybe even prevent a trip to the ER.
Someone could sit down on this toilet and you could, in the future, recognize that they might be in distress or having an issue, send a medic right to their home.
Right.
Just from their morning bathroom routine.
Right, so that if it's a patient who has a little bit more volume in their body because they have congestive heart failure and they had a little bit more salt, then we can get a paramedic to their home, provide some medications like Lasix, which allows them to get some of that fluid out, and then that can prevent a hospitalization. Data would come in, there would be a command center that's looking at the data. If we think that the suspicion is high enough for something catastrophic to happen, we can send paramedic right away. But a step below that, we can call the patient at home and ask them how they're doing. So the idea is to be more proactive as opposed to reactive.
Okay, well, so coming soon to your patients' bathrooms. Thank you very much for your attention, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.